Today we are going to take a deep dive into one of the most challenging diseases of our time, Alzheimer's. We're going to journey from a healthy, functioning brain all the way through the cellular chaos that causes this condition. Okay, let's get right into it.
It almost always starts small, just like it did for Margaret here. A forgotten name, a moment of confusion. You might even brush it off as just a senior moment. But these are often the first whispers of a huge change happening inside the brain, one that affects memory, reasoning, and eventually the very core of who a person is.
So here's our game plan. To really get what goes wrong, we first have to understand what right looks like. We'll start with a healthy brain, then we'll look at the invasion of these things called plaques and tangles. We'll connect that chaos to the symptoms we can see, check out how we diagnose and treat it, and then we'll wrap up by looking at the entire journey of the disease. First up, let's establish our baseline, a healthy brain. I want you to think of it like a bustling city. You've got billions of neurons, brain cells, firing away, communicating, and keeping everything running smoothly on this incredibly complex superhighway of information. To really get what's going on, we have to zoom way in, down to a single neuron. Inside each one, you've got these structures called microtubules. They're kind of like railroad tracks, and they make up this amazing transport system that moves nutrients and information all over the cell. Now, what holds these tracks together? Well, those are the railroad ties. And in our neuron, that's a super important protein called tau. When everything's healthy, it's all stable, organized, and running just perfectly.
All right, so that's the ideal. But what happens when this perfectly organized system starts to fall apart? Well, this is where the two most infamous culprits in Alzheimer's disease make their grand entrance: plaques and tangles.
And the effect is, well, it's devastating. You can literally see it. On the left, you've got a healthy brain, plump, full. On the right, a brain that's been ravaged by severe Alzheimer's. I mean, just look at that dramatic shrinkage. The grooves are so much wider. This is what we call cortical atrophy, and it represents a massive, tragic loss of brain cells.
So how do we get from a healthy brain to that? It all starts right here, at the microscopic level, with two main problems. Problem number one happens outside the neurons. These sticky proteins called beta amyloid start clumping together, forming what we call plaques. Think of them as roadblocks gumming up the works between cells. Now, the leading idea is that this chaos on the outside triggers problem number two inside the neuron. Our tau proteins, those railroad ties, they become abnormal. They let go of the microtubules and they start tangling up with each other. Without that support, the microtubule tracks just fall apart. The neuron's whole transport system collapses, and pretty soon, the cell itself dies.
Okay, let's lock these two definitions in, because they're absolutely crucial. Neurotic plaques, they're made of that beta amyloid, and they form between the nerve cells. They're the roadblocks. Then you have neurofibrillary tangles, made of tau, and they form inside the cells, causing that internal collapse. Plaques and tangles, remember those names. They are the two classic pathological signs of Alzheimer's disease. So now we've got this complete mess at the cellular level, right? Neurons are dying, communication lines are down. But how does that translate into the symptoms that people like Margaret actually experience day to day? Let's connect those dots.
It's all a progression as more and more of these neurons die off. In the mild stage, the damage is often in the parts of the brain responsible for memory and complex thought. So that's when you see trouble with things like managing money. As it moves into the moderate stage, the damage spreads to language centers and areas that regulate emotion. That's where the confusion and personality changes come from. And in the severe stage, the damage is just so widespread. The brain can't even control basic functions anymore, like movement or speaking.
You can really see how this just cascades into a devastating ripple effect. That brain damage in severe Alzheimer's leads to really serious physical problems. Dysphagia, which is difficulty swallowing, happens because the brain just can't coordinate those muscles anymore. That can lead to things like aspiration pneumonia. And being bedbound brings on a whole host of other risks like blood clots and infections. It's a total cascade of system failures, but it all starts in the brain.
So faced with this incredibly complex disease, how do doctors actually figure out what's going on, and what can they do to try and fight back?
While a 100% definitive diagnosis can only be made after death from an autopsy, clinicians have some really powerful tools. Neuropsychological tests like this one, the clock drawing test, are incredibly revealing. It looks simple, right? But drawing a clock and putting the hands at a specific time requires memory, planning, and spatial awareness, all functions that get hammered by AD. You can see the deterioration so clearly, from a normal clock to one drawn by someone in the late stages. And today, we can actually see the pathology in a living brain, which is just amazing. This is a PET scan. Those bright red and yellow areas? That's a high concentration of amyloid plaques. This kind of technology lets doctors see the hallmarks of Alzheimer's directly, confirming what those other tests suggest.
When we talk about treatment, the strategy really has two parts: manage the symptoms and, more recently, try to slow down the disease itself. For symptoms, drugs like cholinesterase inhibitors work by boosting the levels of a key chemical messenger, which helps the remaining healthy cells talk to each other better. Others, like glutamate regulators, help protect brain cells from getting damaged. Now, the newer drugs, these amyloid-targeting agents, are a whole different ballgame. They're designed to actually attach to and remove those beta-amyloid plaques we talked about. This is a huge step, but it's important to know there's still a lot of scientific debate about how much clinical benefit they provide, because just removing the plaques doesn't always stop the cognitive decline.
Okay, let's take a step back and pull all of this together. Let's recap the whole journey, from a single healthy neuron to a clinical diagnosis. It's really a cascade, a domino effect. We start with a perfectly healthy neuron. Then those plaques and tangles start to form. They disrupt the neuron's function and eventually kill it. As more and more cells die, we see cognitive decline. That decline then shows up as the clinical symptoms we all recognize. And finally, that leads to a diagnosis and a plan for treatment. It's a logical, though absolutely tragic, progression.
And this is not some rare, abstract condition. An estimated 6.7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's right now. That number just highlights the immense public health challenge we're facing and why the search for better treatments is so urgent.
The good news is the science is moving faster than ever. We've gone from just describing the disease to actually targeting its root causes. So the big question is, where do we go from here? What's the next frontier? Will it be a way to prevent those plaques and tangles from ever even forming? A treatment that can actually reverse the damage? Or the ultimate goal, a cure? That's what scientists are working on right now.